Thank you for having me. It's great to see you guys. Look, I think that the bill brings an enormous amount in terms of revenue from boosting economic growth. A lot of numbers get flown about from the CBO and other sources, and none of them include the effects that the bill will have on economic growth, which, let's remind ourselves what happened with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. In the face of all of the doubters, economic growth in the president's first term until COVID was 2.8%, real economic growth, right? If you look at corporate revenue as a share of GDP, it went from 1.6% of GDP to 1.8% of GDP, despite the reduction in corporate rates. And this is how pro-growth economic policy works. It boosts economic growth. More income means more tax base. More tax base means more revenue, and that brings deficit down. We calculate that between all the president's policies, from the One Big Beautiful Bill, the deregulatory agenda, the energy abundance, they'll boost economic growth by about a percentage point. This brings in about $4 trillion more revenue. So whereas the Congressional Budget Office says this thing's going to cost $3.25 trillion, we say that's nonsense. You have to include the economic growth that's going to come as a result of the bill and the other policies from the president, and then you add $4 trillion to that $3.25 trillion deficit, you get to plus $750 billion surplus. So there's lots of revenue that's coming in from economic growth and other sources that are going to bring the deficit down.
Okay. There's a lot of calculations there that you have made. It has not convinced some, including Andy Harris from the House Freedom Caucus. He joined us last hour and said this. I'll get you to respond.
This is not ready for prime time. We support the president's agenda. The president's agenda was not to raise the deficit by $750 billion over the next 10 years. The bottom line is now the House is going to have its say. This is not going to sail through the House. We're going to have to negotiate with the Senate one more time, and that's just appropriate. That's the way the legislative process works and the way it should work on a bill of this size.
So, Stephen, how do you respond to him?
So what I'd say is, number one, voting against this bill is effectively voting for the biggest tax hike in history, and that would be really bad to stick American workers and American businesses with a $4 trillion tax hike that'll send the economy careening into recession. But what I'd also say to him is that the deficit will come down. The deficit will come down through economic growth and other policies that we're implementing. Let me tell you all the things that are not included in the CBO score that are getting ignored by the doubters in this process. There's better revenue from economic growth that I just mentioned a moment ago. That's about $4 trillion. There's going to be about $3 trillion of tariff revenue coming in, too, that because they don't come in through the legislative process, they don't get counted in the score. But those $3 trillion are as good as any other dollars for bringing down the deficit. There's about $1.5 trillion of further administrative cuts. These are things like reduced headcount at federal agencies, the government becoming more efficient, doing more with less. And there's also another about $1.5 trillion of reduced interest expenses because we're borrowing less for all the other things. You add all this up, you get to about $8.5 to $11 trillion of growth across all of these different means of, $8.5 to $11 trillion of reduced deficit from all of these means of bringing the deficit down. And it's all in all, combined, extremely powerful. And so it's very, very powerful deficit reduction. It'll bring the debt to GDP ratio down by over 20 percentage points relative to what the CBO expects.
Okay, so this was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent taking on claims that, well, that this only benefits the wealthy in this country. Listen here.
This is a deal for working people because what we have is President Trump's 2017 tax bill, and we are overlaying that with the president's campaign promises. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the lower tax on Social Security, and tax deductibility of American-made cars. Those sound like working-class tax breaks to me.
So that's how he takes on the claims that this only benefits the wealthy. How do you respond to those?
So I think Secretary Bessent is completely correct that things like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, these are all aimed at the working class and at seniors, and that's a very, very, very progressive means of doing tax policy. But let me say one other thing, which is that the best way to help the working class is to create an environment in which firms want to hire them. If firms are growing, if businesses are growing, businesses are prospering, businesses are expanding their lines of operation, they need more workers. And when they need more workers, they hire them and they pay them more. And so the president knows that the best way to create jobs, the best way to boost wages is to create an economic boom, an environment in which businesses just want to hire as many people as